Hello and welcome to another episode of Heavenly Minded. My name is Chloe Wilson. I'm a presenter on UCB2, and this podcast explores what it means to be in the world and not of it, and what that actually looks like in everyday, practical kind of life. You know, it can be really easy to go, yes, I'm to be heavenly minded, but how actually do we live that out? Well, today we're going to be joined by a lovely lady called Carolyn MacDonald. Now, she has a chronic pain condition. She's been suffering with it for quite some time, and it's actually a condition that not many people know very much about. It's a very hard word to pronounce, so I'm hoping that Carolyn can correct me when I say it wrong. But I'm really looking forward to hearing what Carolyn has to say on how we can stay heavenly minded even when we're battling different types of illness. Well, Carolyn, welcome to Heavenly Minded. So the condition that you've got is called fibromyalgia, and I struggle saying that word because I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know anything about it. So number one, can you tell me how to say it correctly? And number two, can you actually explain what the condition is?
Yeah, so it's fibromyalgia. When my GP first told me about it, I was in the same position, but I had to keep asking, sorry, how do I say it and how do I spell that? So it's a chronic pain condition, which sadly there isn't a lot known about it. Most doctors and researchers think that it's a neurological condition, so it's commonly thought that it's caused by a breakdown in communication between the brain and the nervous system. So when you stub your toe, your brain sends pain signals down to that part of your body and you feel the pain. But when you have fibromyalgia, there's a breakdown in communication there where your brain is just constantly sending out the pain signals. So I just constantly feel like I've stubbed my toe, but it's everywhere.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say I can definitely relate to stubbing my toe. I do that on a regular basis and the pain is excruciating depending what I've stubbed it on. So the kind of pain that you're experiencing, is it like stubbing your toe on something that's, I don't know, like rock solid, like a piece of wood, or is it a slightly more reduced pain, if you like?
To be honest, it varies from day to day, and in different parts of the body. So like for me, it mostly affects my hands, my back and my legs. But then one of my friends who also has fibromyalgia, for her it mostly affects her neck and her chest. So it varies from person to person, which is why there's not a lot known about it, because with every patient it sort of varies. And for some people it means they can't get out of bed. Where there's, I'm in a fortunate position, I'm able to work part-time, although there are some days where I wake up and think, oh, do I have to? Sometimes it just feels a little bit achy.
Yeah. And how long does that pain go on for? You said it kind of varies, but is there like an average amount of time that the pain would last for? Or again, is it just kind of a wake up and see how you feel kind of situation?
Yeah, pretty much wake up and see how you feel. You can get flare-ups, sort of if you have a lot going on one week, it's sort of anticipated that at the end of the week you'll have a flare-up. Sort of the areas where you commonly feel the pain will just sort of be inflamed. Or the pain could spread to other areas as well.
Well, you mentioned a few moments ago that you are able to work part-time, which is great, but how does your condition affect you on a day-to-day basis? Because as you've just said, some days you wake up and the pain is intense, other days you wake up and it's just like a dull ache, or maybe it's not even there. So when you wake up in the morning and the pain is there and you're really suffering, how does that affect the rest of your day?
A big part of it is the fatigue that comes with it. And when the pain's higher, the fatigue's higher. I'm very fortunate in my position that my manager is very kind, very understanding. If I need to, I can work from home. Although I do try to get into the office whenever I can. I think on the days when it is hard, it's trying to just find that motivation to that initial sort of, if I get out of bed, then I'll go downstairs. And it's sort of building those small achievements for yourself. Like, okay, I've got downstairs, now I'll make some breakfast. And it's sort of learning that baby steps are okay. Has been a very big part of it. And learning that the small day-to-day tasks that I used to just do without thinking twice, it's okay if that's what I've achieved.
Let's just spiral right back to the start of your journey with fibromyalgia. You literally just come back from Australia, right? Talk us through what happened.
Yeah, so I've been living in Sydney for a year, and I studied at Sydney Missionary and Bible College. And on my return home, I went through things very quickly. So I got home just before Christmas, spent Christmas with my family, then moved to a different part of Scotland where I used to work because I was picking up my old job. And it was just sort of a huge change for me, and more than I had expected it to be. At the time, I was doing work at a bed and breakfast. So I was changing over up to 2-3 bedrooms a day, as well as 2 apartments, serving breakfast, cleaning, sorting laundry. And I just sort of, over a few weeks, started to notice that, oh, I'm getting quite tired when I walk up the stairs. Oh, that's a bit odd. And didn't really think much of it. And then was like, oh, my hands are getting really sore when I'm even just like changing pillowcases or ironing sheets. That doesn't normally happen. And then there was things like, oh, I'm really struggling with getting out the shower and getting out of bed in the morning. Something's not right. So I booked an appointment with my GP. I was very, very fortunate in that the GP that I saw was really, really lovely and wanted to sort of explore every avenue and figure things out. Her first thought was rheumatoid arthritis. So I went through to the nearest hospital and had an appointment with a rheumatologist. At this point, she had fibromyalgia in the back of her mind, but wanted to score out the arthritis before sort of going down any other routes. Because that's sort of the big thing with fibromyalgia, is you have to score everything else out before you can say, okay, this is what it is.
Is that because they don't really know very much about it, so they have to kind of, as you say, just kind of go through the list and cross everything off before officially diagnosing it?
Yes, usually that's the case. And there's some people that I've spoken to who, sadly the case is, some doctors just don't believe the pain's there. They just go, oh, it's just growing pains, or oh, you must just be tired, or it can quite often be written off. But I was very blessed in seeing the GP that I did see. And sadly, it's not the case for everyone.
So how did you feel when the GP essentially went, right, you've got fibromyalgia? What were your initial thoughts?
It was quite strange. I had a very big sense of relief at first because I just thought, okay, thank goodness this is what it is. Just to be able to say, okay, this is what's wrong was really helpful because it had been going on for quite a few months now and I just didn't know what was going on. And at first I didn't really want to label, but then the relief that I felt when I did know what it was like, okay, actually, I can now sort of come to terms with what this is. And whereas before it was just like, I'm sore and I don't know why. So having that clarification made things a lot easier. But then there was also a huge realization of, okay, this is permanent. It was coming to terms with the fact that this is going to be my life now, that things are going to look very different to what I'd previously thought. When I returned from Australia, and things were quite difficult for me anyway, and just with, you've been away for a year and things change and you change. So sort of slotting back into life had been a bit tricky anyway. So then sort of adding this on top, I was a bit like, oh goodness, okay, this is a lot to take in.
Kind of looking back to when you were first diagnosed compared to where you are now, obviously there are some days when you will wake up and the pain will be quite intense, and you've got a blog that you often post things on, and in one particular blog post you talk about how you still wrestle with God. So just tell us a little bit about that in those moments when you're just getting so fed up of it. What are some of the thoughts that you have as you wrestle with it?
Part of it is just like, why is this happening? And for most people, when they're diagnosed with fibromyalgia, it's because of a big event has happened that sort of triggers it to really come to the surface. So usually it's underlying for a long time, and then something like a big change or perhaps an accident will sort of bring it to the surface and make it sort of become that constant part of your life. And on the hard days, it is learning that I have to go forward in God's strength and not my own. I am quite an independent person, which I never really noticed much or even realised for myself until I got the fibromyalgia and had to ask for help. And that's always been a very big stumbling block for me. I like to do things on my own and in my way and in my time, and this is the plan. At the end of each year, I'm like looking at all the different diaries that are on sale and getting all excited to like pick my word for the year and a verse for the year and plan everything out. Like it's just the way that I am. And then to then suddenly have God just go, okay, I'll take it and I'll just flip it on its head. It was a big wake up call for me, realizing actually I'm not in control and I can't do this in my strength. But actually that's not necessarily a bad thing. I definitely still wrestle with that because, you know, I'm human.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to be able to make plans and to do things and to move forward with things. But it's learning that it's God's timing and not my own.
Do you think maybe that one of the lessons that God has taught you through literally almost pulling the rug from out under your feet, receiving this diagnosis, do you think that one of the lessons that he has taught you is to depend on him more?
Definitely. I think when I was in Australia, I started to learn that. And I'd always thought sort of the years leading up to Australia that God was getting me ready for going to Australia and going to Bible college. And it's this year away from my family. And then when I got back, I realized actually that year in Australia was preparing me for what was to come. And that was learning to depend on God in ways I had never done before.
So in terms of staying heavenly minded, as well as suffering with fibromyalgia, how do you manage to stay in the world but not be of it? Because I was thinking recently, we live in a day and age where it's all about self-love and self-care. And if you are suffering with something, then to kind of focus inwards, and I guess in a sense, rightly so, because you know, pain that people experience, we wouldn't wish that on anybody, and we need to look after ourselves. It says in the Bible that our bodies are a temple, so we need to nurture them and look after them. But then at the same time, we know that our bodies are only temporary. So how do you stay heavenly minded in all of this?
For me, when I read Revelation, the part that always stood out to me was that there would be no more tears, no more crying. God has made me a very sensitive, very emotional person. I'm happy, I cry. I'm sad, I cry. I'm a crier. Yep. And that's always the verse that stood out for me. And then in recent years, is actually that realization that there will be no more pain. And it's holding on to that hope that one day Jesus will come back and he'll wipe away every tear and he'll take away that pain. But there's also that comfort in knowing actually any pain that I'm experiencing now, Jesus has been there. Like he knows what that feels like. He's experienced it more intensely than I ever could. You know, the day-to-day pain that I experience, it's not pleasant, it's horrible. There's days where I just think, oh, for goodness sake, can it just stop? But then I have to take a step back and remember actually the pain that Jesus went through for me is so much greater than any pain that I'll ever experience. Because he went through that pain, one day he'll take all the pain away. And it's sort of holding on to that truth and that hope really that we have that one day God will sort of clean the slate and everything will be new and he will wipe away our tears. It's really been a huge comfort for me. And a big lesson as well is learning to be thankful. Yeah. I think especially once I got back from Australia, in the time that I was going through my diagnosis, I didn't know how to react. I'd come back and everything was different and I was different and I didn't know how I fitted in anymore. I pushed away the people I used to be friends with, and thankfulness just wasn't a part of my faith anymore. And then even just in the past few months, taking that time to step back and, okay, what am I thankful for today? It's really sort of reminded me that, okay, although I am facing difficulties, God always gives us something to be thankful for. And that's been something that's really kept me going, really, and reminded me that, you know, even in the pain, even in the difficulties, God has a purpose and he's still good.
Amen. And that can be like the number one reason to be thankful, the fact that God is the same and he's still good. And I've got a friend who, if I'm having a bit of what I like to call a wallow, if something bad has happened or I'm just feeling so fed up, I am a wallower. I will sit there and I'll go, oh, it's not fair. Why has this had to happen? Or I'm not happy with the way that this person's treated me. X, Y, and Z. So many different reasons for me to wallow. And I've got a friend and she will say to me, Chloe, give me 3 things that you are thankful for right now. And she always starts it all off. She'll give me 3 things that she's thankful for. And she'll normally start with something like her eyesight. She'll say, I'm thankful for my eyes that I can see. I'm thankful for my legs that can carry me and help me to walk. Or I'm thankful for a bed that I can sleep in. And I just sit there and I go, yeah. And I think, as you said, thankfulness is such an important part of our faith because it kind of takes our eyes off ourselves and points to God, right?
Oh, definitely. I think it puts things into perspective. I mean, for me, I've always loved writing. Ever since I was little, I've loved to write. And when I became a Christian, that was the main way that I prayed, was through prayer journaling. And then when I started getting the pain with fibromyalgia, it mostly affects my hands. And that was a real battle for me for a good few years. And really only until recently have I accepted that, okay, my prayer can look different. I can still write, but it just won't be sort of the pages and pages and paragraphs that I used to do. So now I just, at the end of the day, I have my A5 notebook and I write down my 4 headings. I write praise, sorry, worries, and thankfulness. And I just do little bullet points. And I just find that to be so helpful that whilst I'm also giving my worries to God, I can also say thank you. Like, it's learning that we can hold both anxiety and joy at the same time, and that God is there within them both.
You've also got your blog as well, where you write lots of different things. Is that something that you started before you were diagnosed, or was it afterwards? Talk us through your blog.
Yeah, so I started blogging, goodness, I think I started where I was in high school, and then continued it when I actually did radio college in Edinburgh. And because that was part of our course, was having a blog where we shared about our coursework. And then it sort of went on the back burner for a while. Before I went to Australia, I worked for a Christian charity, and I really enjoyed sharing my faith on my blog in that period, and whilst I was at college as well in Australia. And then again, it's one of those things that when I got home, I was really wrestling in my faith, that it just took a back burner really, and I just sort of let it all go. And it was the end of last year, I was experiencing a bit of sort of bitterness and jealousy of seeing different people going off and doing different things. And I was like, oh, but I want to be doing that. Or, oh, they're doing that course, why can't I do that? And then God sort of said to me, but I didn't call you to do that. I called you to be a writer. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I never really thought of myself as a writer before. Like, I enjoy writing, I enjoy reading, I enjoy blogging, but it was actually that realization, actually, this is what God's called me to do. So I need to just do it. And since I've sort of stepped out into that, although it's been hard and I've battled a lot of anxiety around it, God's been opening doors. And within that I've written for Women Alive magazine, I've joined the team for Girl Got Faith. And it's really exciting to see, okay, I've stepped into what God's called me to do, and now He's making a path with that.
So rather than looking at the circumstances around and going, I wish I could do this, I wish I could do that, actually looking at the gifts and talents that God has given you and going, well, He's given me this ability. I may not be able to dance, I may not be able to lead worship, but I know for me personally, He's given me the gift of being able to speak, not always fluently, not always with all the words put together, but He's given me, someone once said to me, Chloe, you've been given the gift of the gob. And I went, right, thanks. But you know what? I say that with pride now, because I know that is one of the gifts that God has given me. But I love that you are channeling and feeding into those gifts that He's given you. And would you say that, you know, that little A5 journal that you've got that you do at the end of your day when you're praying and then writing those blog posts, would you say that those are things that help you to stay focused on the things above rather than the things of this earth?
Definitely. When I worked at the Christian charity, there was a wonderful lady that I worked with called Jen, who is still one of my dearest friends. There's a big age gap between us, but she's just one of the people that I can go to with everything. And she'd said to me one day, she went, it doesn't matter what's going on here, you've got to live with an eternal perspective. And it just really, really hit home for me of like, actually, what I do now has an eternal impact, and that's what matters. And that's what I need to remember, is that actually what God's asking me to do and called me to do. It's for his kingdom, for his plan, for his purposes, and for his glory ultimately. And it doesn't matter what mistakes I make along the way. He already knows about all that. He knows what's going to happen. He knows sort of the difficulties that I'll face in day to day, but he can still use that for his glory and for his kingdom. And I just need to trust that he's able to do that. And also, going back to being thankful, to be thankful that he's including me in that. Like, how amazing that the God who made the heavens and the earth wants to use me in his plan.
If there's someone listening right now who maybe is struggling with a long-term condition, because yours is, you've had to accept that you're going to be battling with fibromyalgia for a very long time. I mean, there's no actual cure, is there?
No, there's a lot of research being done into it, and I mean, there's painkillers that can help, there's physio, there's different things that can help, but again, since it affects everyone differently, different people need different things to help them cope with it.
So you have essentially accepted that this is going to be a long-term battle, and there are various other conditions and illnesses, mental health issues too, that people will be battling with for long periods of time and maybe for the rest of their lives. What would you say to those people who are maybe really struggling to lift their eyes up to heaven? Because it's all good and well me saying, this podcast is about being in the world and not of it, and today we're talking about illnesses and all of that. It's not just as simple as click your fingers and everything's sorted and you're focused on Jesus and you're happy. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's really battling with that right now?
I think a big part of it is it's okay to feel however it is that you're feeling. God's given us emotions. God is a God who feels emotions as well. Like we see in the Bible, Jesus living out his emotions. We see when he's wept, when he's been angry, when like he's reacted to things, and it's okay to do the same. It's okay to take a step back and go, actually, this is how I feel. But I think the important thing that took me a really long time is to then take that and give it to God. Alongside with the fibromyalgia, I also got diagnosed with anxiety at the same time. And for such a long time, I just kept that completely to myself and was like, nope, like, this is really bad. I can't tell anyone about this. But actually, it was, God already knows about it. He knows me far better than I know myself. There are days when it's so hard that actually all you can do is just cry. It's just cry to God. But he understands that and he knows that. And it's about acknowledging those feelings and that pain, but then giving it to God as well. And that's really hard, and it's going to be probably a daily task. I know it is for me, but it's 3 years now since I got initially diagnosed, but there's still basically every day that I have to come to God and go, this is hard, or I'm struggling, or I'm feeling anxious, can you take this? And I still hold on to it. It's still something that I struggle with, is letting go of those emotions, but it's okay to keep coming back to God with the same thing over and over and over, because that's how we build a relationship with him. That's how he draws close to us. And then I think the other thing is it's okay to ask for help. Like I said, my diagnosis was 3 years ago. Only just the end of last year did I actually reach out for a bit of extra support with it. And that took me a really long time. And it's learning that it is okay to just say, actually, I need help with this, whether that be from a friend or a family member or someone at church or a counsellor or your GP. It's okay to ask for help. I think it is a bit of a British thing that we go to church on Sunday, we put in our Sunday face, a Sunday smile, our Sunday clothes, and everything's fine. And, oh, how's your week been? Oh, it's been good. How was yours? Oh, it's been good. And actually, that's not going to help anyone. Churches filled with broken people, and I think the sooner that we all realise that, the sooner we can actually be there for each other and help each other. And just learn how to support each other in whatever way we can, really.
Yeah, I was just thinking churches full of broken people pretending to be fixed and absolutely perfect, but, under the surface we are all completely and utterly broken, and actually opening up to people who are essentially our family, like that is the best thing that we can be doing. But taking that first step, of course, is quite hard. But, as we mentioned earlier, in today's society, there's often this whole, well, look after yourself. It's all about self and self-care and self-love. And there's always that phrase, it's okay to not be okay. And I do agree with that. But based on what you've just said, Carolyn, I think that what we can say is that it's okay to not be okay, but give it all to God, because he already knows what's going on and he knows how you're feeling, and you need to just lay it all before him and tell him about it. Would you say that's fair?
Definitely. I think that's always the thing that we have to add on, because that is, in a sense, that being in the world, as like you said, there is that phase of it's okay not to be okay, but then also having the mindset is now take it to God, and that's always the step that can help us move towards healing as well.
Amen to that. You put that so beautifully, and I think that is such a wonderful note to end this episode today. Carolyn, thank you so much for sharing your journey, for giving us those little pearls of wisdom based on what you've learnt, and thank you for joining us on Heavenly Minded.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so pleased that Carolyn was able to join us today on Heavenly Minded and to share a little insight into what it's like to be battling with fibromyalgia. I really admire her honesty and her bravery, but whether that is something that you are battling with yourself or whether it's something completely different, I love what she said about how she's had to learn to go on in God's strength and not in her own. And I think that is something that everyone can take away from that podcast. As we said earlier, it's open to discussion, it's open to interpretation, but know that whatever you're going through, you are not alone. And if this episode has discussed a few things that maybe you found difficult, can I encourage you to call the UCB prayer line? They're there to pray with you, they're there to love you and to point you to Jesus. There's more information available online at ucb.co.uk/pray. I'll be back with you next Wednesday with another episode of Heavenly Minded. So enjoy whatever you're getting up to, and I'll speak to you soon.